Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Ange and thanks for tuning in today. Today I'm going to take the plunge and talk about a few things that I've been wanting to put into a video for a while. If you don't mind, I have made a fair few notes and I'm not sure how long this is going to end up being. I'm going to be looking down at my notes because I don't want to leave things out that I feel are important. But the topic of this video is my opinion of eating disorder treatment in Australia as it stands now. I think we could all agree that it's necessary for inpatient treatment to happen if a person is in a dangerous situation. However, for me, in every single admission, in the psychological sense, there was more harm than good done. And eating disorders are psychological issues in a big way. So over the 25 years that I've had anorexia, so since the age of 13, I have been in medical wards and psychiatric wards that have, sort of eating disorder programs, and I was seriously traumatized over my life from all of these admissions. And so some of the issues around this is what I want to discuss today. So first of all, one of the really big problems that I see with the treatment in any facility for eating disorder patients is that it's very much a one-size-fits-all approach. So I think we could all agree that eating disorders are mental issues and that people with mental issues have individual needs. So there's different underlying issues behind those issues, there's different emotions, maintaining factors, there's also different associated behaviours, there's different problems and differing levels of severity with each person, and there's different lengths of time with the disorder, and that's all true of eating disorder patients. However, if you compare eating disorder patients to anyone with any other kind of mental illness, it's a completely different approach and it's a completely different mindset towards people with eating disorders. So, I think to myself, what's the best way to treat a whole bunch of different people or with an eating disorder is treat them all the same, and that seems to be the approach that is taken, whereas you would never do that with someone who had serious anxiety or serious bipolar disorder or depression. You would never put a whole bunch of people with a diagnosis of depression together in a group and treat them all the same, and especially you wouldn't treat them in the ways that eating disorder patients are treated often. You would seriously damage people if you were to treat them all the same with any other mental illness, and I just think it's such a double standard. So it's very much a herd mentality approach. I don't know, we just don't see that in any other type of treatment for any other mental illness. People are not in a herd. People with mental illnesses are not a herd of people. They're individuals. It makes me so angry when I think about this stuff. We're really careful with any other person who's got a mental illness not to box them in with everybody else. So in my experience, the only individualized component of the eating disorder programs that I was in was that you had a different treating psychiatrist or doctor, but there was only a set amount of treating psychiatrists that were working at the hospital, so you did have the same psychiatrist as about 3 or 4 other people anyway, and the ones that I had were often quite good, and I was always very grateful for that. But over the years and in more recent times, I've been hearing that these doctors that are supposed to be caring for an individual patient on an eating disorder program that treats everyone the same, they've got even less discretion these days. I think that's just shocking. So what does eating disorder inpatient treatment look like? Well, from my experience, they are nothing but humiliating, condescending and punitive. It just doesn't seem right, and I look back at it now and it makes me very angry that it's just the way eating disorders are treated. So eating disorder patients obviously have behaviours they have used to cope with themselves and their emotions, their body image, their food intake, just even their lives. They've got these behaviours, and some of these behaviours are extremely dangerous and damaging. And obviously most of you would know all about those behaviours and agree that they do need to be curbed. So behaviours, instead of being treated like a feature of the mental illness that that this person has, you treat it as though you're a naughty child, and you treat it as though all of the people that you're with in the eating disorder program are also naughty children. There's no acknowledging that you actually are a person. You're just a naughty child, and you need to be punished if you do any of your behaviours. I think the whole naughty children idea that people have about eating disorders, especially, well, unfortunately, especially the nurses that are, supervising these programs, who don't know anything about people with eating disorders, I just feel that it's because eating disorders are stigmatised. We're stigmatised. We're put into a box as though we're all the same. We're all privileged white young females who want to be skinny. It's just not the case. The diversity within eating disorders, I can't understand why there's such a stigma around it, that we're all the same. When you go into these programs, a lot of people have been using certain behaviours for years to control our emotions, control our food intake, control our lives. That kind of thing needs to be treated with compassion and not punishment. And that's just not what happens in treatment. It's all punishment, it's all condescension, it's all humiliation if you do these things. So some of the punishments that were included in the program rules were things like being excluded from groups, which I can't understand how that's helpful, because these groups are supposed to be therapy. Being confined to your cubicle or your room. When I first went into treatment, we had years and years ago, I think it was 2007, we had our own rooms, but because we were seen as a bunch of naughty children, and they wanted to cut costs for on treating us, they decided to put us all into one room and give us each a cubicle. So it became cubicles. You'd be repeatedly reprimanded by nursing staff. If a couple of times that I was reprimanded and punished for not finishing meals and things like that. And I was confined to my cubicle, and I remember just the dirty looks. Even it came down to that level of mistreatment. It was dirty looks from the nurses, and then the nurse changeover would happen, and there'd be a dirty look from the next nurse that was looking after you. It was just sad. I just was so... I was so frightened in treatment all the time. I think that changed in my last couple of admissions, but before that, in my first few admissions to hospital, I didn't feel safe anywhere. I didn't feel safe at all, and it just left a lot of emotional scars. But also things like the removal of your belongings or your digital devices. I'd seen that happen to a lot of other people. Also, because you were with a group of other eating disordered patients, and you would do a lot of groups together, it would often be brought up what you individually had done, and you would be shamed in front of the group and warned in front of the group, and sometimes even doled out punishment in front of everybody else. That kind of thing is humiliating, and that kind of thing really is quite traumatizing, and that's just that's how it works. So I personally have never seen these kind of punitive approaches work, and if you really think about it, with any other mental illness, it just doesn't make any sense, and it would always cause further trauma and further harm psychologically to a patient. And unfortunately, that's what I went through in hospital, and that's what I saw a lot of people around me go through. Why do eating disorder patients not recover? Why do they go back? Why do they relapse all the time? I knew people who were in and out of the inpatient facilities that I was in plus 20 times, within the years. It's just really sad. It's because we're not treating them, we are hurting them. I just believe that if people were treated appropriately in the first place with support and not punishment and not humiliation, we would have a lot more people recovering with inpatient treatment, instead of just being fed up, and gaining weight and then not being able to cope and going home and losing it all and being stuck back in hospital yet again. Because that's what happens. That's what I saw happen to most people that I was inpatient with. Actually, I was inpatient a couple of times, and in the first time I was with a group of people. The second time, when I went back in 3 years later, those people had already been in back and forth a number of other times in between that, and were there again. So, 3 years later, this just does not work. It does not work. It also brings me to another point. So, because eating disorder patients are treated all the same on a eating disorder program and are treated the way that they are, they have to sit together at some of the worst and most triggering times of the day, which is around meal times, and meal times are 6 times a day. So basically, you are spending most of your time around a group of other disordered patients, and it creates an environment of resentment and pits patients against one another, because when one patient has a behaviour and is punished for it, you would generally find that the rest of the group would be punished for it as well. And in my next video, I want to bring up a few examples that I know about that. It wasn't that they were trying to be naughty. It wasn't that they were trying to not cooperate, but because there is a disorder here, and you're treated like a pack, so yeah, everyone gets punished. And then there was a lot of bitchiness, a lot of ganging up on people because one person had a lapse into a behaviour, and then there'd be bullying on that person. I don't see how any of this is conducive to treatment. Certainly wasn't in my case. If there's one thing I know about people who suffer from eating disorders, it's that they tend to have a lot of issues around self-esteem. I know I did, and the not good enough syndrome, perfectionism, and so yeah, they're already particularly hard on themselves in a lot of ways. I mean, when you really think about it, or at least it makes sense to me, when you really think about it, there's no way that kind of treatment could do anything else other than reinforce those issues. The next big problem I see with the eating disorder inpatient treatment at the moment is that it's just triggering, and treatment should be exactly the opposite of that, in my opinion. Because what could be more helpful than putting a whole group of eating disordered patients all together to eat meals and sit together after meals when they're at their most stressed? It's just a fantastic approach, I guess, isn't it? You can learn behaviours from other eating disorder patients. You're exposed to other eating disorder patients' bodies and their food habits, and that's at a particularly difficult time around meals. I don't know if this is the case with any other mental illness, but with eating disorders, it's very hard to avoid a competitive nature. It's really hard to avoid the competitive nature of the disease becoming worse in inpatient treatment when you're surrounded by a bunch of other eating disordered patients. Hospital treatment is all about getting you in there, making you gain weight and throwing you out, and in the meantime putting up a front that there is some kind of psychological help that will benefit you long term. And sorry, but that's just not what I have seen, and I've been in hospital a lot of times. I can understand that in the public sector it may be more difficult to assign, more nursing staff to deal with a larger group of patients, but I do not think that in a private hospital that level of care should be acceptable. I mean, we would have one nurse that was there for 10 or more patients, and that was at meal times too. And so you think about that and you think, it's no wonder that no one gets anywhere. It's at meal times, and after meal times, that one-on-one direct support can be extremely beneficial. Well, just throughout the whole process of trying to recover, one-on-one support is extremely beneficial. And now that I skipped going to hospital this time and decided to do this myself, I've been able to experience one-on-one direct support with a support worker. I've got a dietitian that doesn't give me a cookie cutter meal plan, and a psychologist who takes me seriously and is there for me. And that's, I believe, the way that it should be done these days. I believe that if patients were able to have more of an individualised approach, they could avoid all the problems of that pack mentality that happens in hospital, and they could feel safer while engaging in the process of eating. They could receive gentle encouragement when they do things well, and instead of just a punishment when they have a lapse into, a behaviour, God forbid. They could be gently dealt with in the event of behaviours rather than what goes on now. And the whole competition nature of eating together at a table could be avoided, and things could be a lot less traumatic. And then there would be no resentment that would build up amongst patients either. Just my opinion. I'm going to leave it there for this video, guys, but there is another video that I am working on, another two actually. The next one is going to be a continuation of my opinions of inpatient treatment, and the one after that will be some of the experiences that I actually had in hospital, so that will be a more detailed video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.